Hey, I'm Andrew with 10-Minute Therapy, and today we're going to continue our discussion on cognitive distortions. Now, in our last two videos, we've looked at different cognitive distortions or forms of faulty thinking. And today we're going to wrap up that discussion by looking at three more different types of faulty thinking, two of them being very connected, and the third one kind of requiring its own time and attention. So let's go ahead and get the clock started. We'll get right to it. So, as we continue to examine cognitive distortions, I just want to remind you that what we've been examining are not diagnoses or not things associated with a particular mental health disorder. Cognitive distortions are simply forms of faulty thinking. There are times when our own thinking betrays us, and like a crack in the lens of a camera, it then distorts the reality of our circumstances. And so, cognitive distortions are things that all of us wrestle with from one time to another. We've looked at different forms of predictive thinking, but today I want to look at two different kinds of what we might just call negative thinking. And so my hope is that as you hear these, when you hear something that maybe relates to your own thought processes, that this would encourage you to seek out a counselor and begin your own mental health journey, just to have someone kind of guide you through these. So in looking at some forms of negative thinking, the first one that comes to mind is what we call mental filtering. Now, you and I know that a filter is something that removes something else. So, for example, when we run water through a filter, the filter's job is to remove impurities from the water. Therefore, the water that comes through the bottom of the filter is made pure and clean and better for drinking. The filter's job is to catch and remove bacteria, debris, and other kinds of things from the water. In mental filtering, what we're suggesting is that our brains actually filter out certain things, leaving us with one particular thing. And as you might guess, since most cognitive distortions are distorting our perspective for the worst, mental filtering is doing the same thing. So in mental filtering, what we have is a form of thinking wherein my brain filters out positive things and leaves me with the negative. What that means is that throughout the course of my day or week, when I engage in mental filtering, it means that we step back and we look and we realize that every day there are things that occur in our lives that are both positive and negative. Positive and negative. Every single day there are things that we enjoy and things we don't enjoy, things that we might deem good, things we might deem bad. But in mental filtering, my brain is filtering out all of the positive things and it's leaving me with the negative things. So someone who engages in mental filtering, they might look over the course of their day and say, this was a terrible day. This was a horrible week. Oh, I can't stand my job. It's just terrible. There's nothing good that happens. Meanwhile, someone who has a little bit more ability to think critically might be able to step back and see that there were both positive and negative things throughout the day, throughout the week, and at their job. Mental filtering is sort of an unfortunate habit that we can fall into. And like any habit, the more we practice it, the better we get at it. And in this case, the more we practice filtering out positive things and focusing and fixating on the negative things, the more that becomes easy for us to do. It becomes a habit for us. And this is kind of a reality of all cognitive distortions that unfortunately, just like any habit, we practice them and we get really, really good at things that we practice. Unfortunately, this is a practice that creates a lot of negativity in our lives. And so in mental filtering, we are filtering out positives and fixating on the negative, right? In the course of a work day, a good example might be that there are positive things that happen. I have interactions with my coworkers. I'm productive. I get some tasks done. Someone might even say, hey, great job on that project that you finished. But there might be that one negative thing that happened, right? Maybe I got overwhelmed, I got slammed with a new project, or a deadline got pushed up and now I'm stressed. And so in mental filtering, all those positives we just listed, We don't see those. What we see is that one negative thing that happened, and that's all that we can see and think about. And the other form of negative thinking that I want to discuss today actually plays very much into mental filtering. I often say that it's what happens when we engage in mental filtering so much that it becomes a part of our daily thinking and lives that we start to then engage in what we call discounting the positive. So if mental filtering is filtering out the positive and focusing on the negative, then discounting the positive is taking it to another level. Discounting the positive, just like its name implies, means that while I might be focused on some negative things, and I might say, man, I just can't stand this job and nothing good ever happens and it's just horrible. And someone comes along and says, well, at least you have a job. There's something to be thankful for. And immediately my brain discounts that positive thing that this individual just said. Instead of, you're right. Thank you for reminding me that I should be thankful to have a job in a tough economy. Instead, my brain discounts that and thinks, well, maybe it would be better off if I didn't. Maybe it would be better to live on unemployment. At least I could be at home then. Right? So mental filtering, we're filtering out the positive and focusing on the negative. But when we discount the positive, someone could even give me a positive thing to focus on, or even my own brain might say, hey, but what about this? And I discount it. I push it out of the way immediately, and I stay focused and fixated on the negative thing. Even as I've spent these last 5-6 minutes discussing mental filtering and discounting the positive, can you feel the weight of that? Like, can you feel how heavy this discussion is? Can you imagine living in this mindset daily or weekly? You could feel that it would be exhausting, that these cognitive distortions we're talking about, they weigh on people. They cause so much distress. And the reality is they're not necessary. We can live without them. We can retrain our thinking to be more positive and to rehabituate our minds into more positive habits and patterns of thought. And so this leads me into our final cognitive distortion, and it's, in my opinion, one of the most important, so I've saved a few minutes to discuss it. In this cognitive distortion, we label as emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning. Now, as its name implies, emotional reasoning, in the most simplest way I could put it, is simply that we allow our emotions to dictate truth for us. We allow our emotions to reason for us. And so in order to describe this, we have to take a step back and discuss emotions for just a second. Because as a therapist, as a counselor, emotions are deeply important. They're a big part of most sessions with most of my clients. We discuss emotion often. So I am not saying that emotions are not important. Emotions are very important. But the problem with emotional reasoning is that we take emotion and we elevate it to a new level. We say, whatever I'm feeling, whatever my emotions are telling me, that is truth. And the danger of doing that is it leads us in a lot of negative, unhealthy directions. So the truth is, emotions are important. Our emotions tell us something. Our emotions indicate to us that something is off, that maybe I value something or something important to me. Our emotions are trying to tell us something, but when I elevate my emotions to the level of this is truth, now I have a serious issue. Because the truth is, my emotions can fly off the handle at any second. My emotions can react to almost any person or situation. My emotions are not actually an indicator of truth. They're simply telling me how I feel about something. I often like to put it in this analogy. Imagine that you're driving in a car, right? What we want in a healthy emotional and mental mindset is that you are the driver and your emotions are simply a passenger in the car, informing you of some things. But what happens in emotional reasoning is that we slide over to the passenger seat and we put our emotions in the driver's seat and we say, go, take me where you want. And so emotional reasoning can be very dangerous. Let me give you an example of emotional reasoning. It might sound something like this. Um, I might get a text message from a friend or a family member. And as you and I know, text messages don't convey emotion, they just convey words. And so I read this text message, and as I'm reading it and rereading it, I'm interpreting it, and I start to get angry and frustrated because the way that this individual has worded this text message, it feels kind of offensive. And I start to think to myself, I bet they did this on purpose. This person was trying to hurt me. That's why I feel so upset and angry about it. See, what I've done is I've taken how I feel about these words, this text message, and I've now said, well, since I feel angry and offended, it must be true that this individual wanted to hurt me and offend me. They were trying to attack me. But a healthier mindset might be to step back and say, maybe that's not true at all. Maybe that's just what my emotions feel, but maybe the individual meant no ill intent whatsoever. Maybe I should go to the individual and say, hey, what did you mean by that text message? I've read it in kind of a funny way. And so emotional reasoning, and maybe this is one we need to look at individually in the future, emotional reasoning, unfortunately, has been sort of catastrophic in our culture over the last 10 years. In fact, in a very odd turn of events, our society, our culture, and even throughout some of our politics over the last 20 years has started to encourage people to engage in emotional reasoning. This thing that we know to be a cognitive distortion has actually been encouraged amongst a whole generation of people, telling them that whatever you feel, that is your truth. But nothing could be farther from the truth. What you feel is important. It tells you what you value. It tells you how you prioritize things. But it does not indicate to you truth. And it's really important that we start to separate what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. Again, we want to be able to be in control of our emotions, not have my emotions dictate truth for me. Well, as you can see, I have blown by our 10-minute timer by over a minute. So I hope there's some value for you in examining mental filtering, discounting the positive, emotional reasoning, and all the other distortions we've looked at. If you've heard anything that's of value, if you've heard something that sounds like something that maybe you wrestle with, it's a great time to seek out your own counselor, your own therapist, start your own mental health journey, talk to someone, have a third party who's unbiased that can guide you through how do you go about changing some of this type of thinking. If something you've heard might be of value to a friend or family member, share it with them. Maybe they could benefit from it. We're going to continue on this track of looking at some cognitive behavioral therapy. In our next video, we're going to examine how do we change thinking. But in the meantime, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. God bless.